You may have heard the term forest bathing. You may not have heard the term forest therapy. If you are a holistic practitioner and you're using holistic methods for your own self-care or to help others, I invite you to stay tuned to hear my conversation with Certified Forst Therapy Guide, Cheree Ingram. Cheree will share with us exactly what forest therapy is, how it originated, and how you can benefit from experiencing forest therapy. And in addition, she also holds a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania in positive psychology. She's a certified Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction trainer through the John Kabat-Zinn organization. She teaches yoga, and she has an array of other certifications. While I will have her contact information in the show notes, you can go directly to her website, and that's ChereeIngram.com, to learn more about her and her work. My name is Steve Carter, and I am your host for this podcast and an array of other podcasts focused on stress relief. You can learn more about my background by visiting our website at stressreliefradio.com, stressreliefradio.com. With no further delay, let's you and I join my conversation with Cheree Ingram. Cheree, I am so glad you've joined us. Welcome to the Creating Inner Harmony project. Thank you for joining me. I'd like to get right into a question. I know that you have recently completed an extensive training in forest therapy. Do I have that right?
You certainly do.
Okay. And forest therapy is based, at least, or uses forest bathing. For anyone who may not know exactly what forest bathing is, can you share what that is and how it came to be?
Certainly. Thank you for having me here, Steve. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this. It started back in Japan in the 1980s. The government there noticed that people were feeling stressed, burned out, a lot of anxiety. And so they worked with their scientists to discover, or research, I should say, what is it about when people go out in nature, they feel better? And that's where they noted the science, or the chemicals, I should say, of phytocides that come from the trees, that the trees use for inflammation to keep bugs away from them. However, they help human beings with inflammation and a host of other things. So they really encourage their community to go out in nature to help cure some of this burnout and stress and anxiety and all of that. And then we brought it to the United States and we modified it just a bit, and now that's what we call forest therapy. And forest therapy includes things like connection with nature. So there's a guide, and the guide works with individuals, the participants who are on the walk, and helps them settle into their bodies, be more in the present moment, and then connect them through invitations with nature. And it's really just that simple. And, in simple terms, that's what forest therapy is.
Is this a therapy in the sense that people would involve themselves in a forest therapy session to help with something like post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety? What type of individuals, as an example, would be drawn to this experience?
Well, quite honestly, even though the word therapy is there, I think we all can use some of that, Steve, right? So you can actually have a condition, but you could be a normal everyday person, because we all have some levels of stress in our life. And just with the term therapy, just to be really clear, I am a guide. I am not a therapist. The forest is the therapist. So just the fact that anyone would go outside and do a forest walk is helpful. So if they have a heart condition, as you can imagine, of course, stress impacts your cardiovascular system. Being stressed impacts your mental health. It impacts your immune system. So anyone can benefit from being a part of forest therapy.
And you do this, you lead people through this experience, right?
Yes, as you
Okay.
well know.
As I do well know, because I personally had the pleasure to have you lead me through a session, and it was an amazing experience, and I'll share a little bit more about that shortly. Let's say someone wanted to experience this and they don't have you as a guide with them. What I'd like to do in a moment is have you share how you would lead a session. But let's say someone just wants to experience Mother Nature in the forest, in the woods, and even their own backyards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if they wanted to do that, how would you recommend that they go about that?
Hmm. To be perfectly honest, there's a reason why it was a 6-month program, Steve. I believe a person needs a guide. And people go outside and they do get benefits from being in nature, right?
Right.
So it's the fact that they're with the phytosides, with the trees, right? It's those chemicals that are in the air. And there's a host of other things that happen when people are in nature, right? The colors of blue and green have shown to help people psychologically. The fact that they're getting more oxygen. So just being outside in nature and taking a walk has its benefits. And there's lots of research that shows that. However, the difference with forest therapy is the guide invites the person, first of all, right in the beginning, right, with the presence and being settled into the body. So it's being in the present moment and being aware of the body and the 5 senses that drops the person into what we call liminality and being in the present moment as opposed to what's on my phone or what am I going to have for lunch? Where did I park the car? Do I need to get gas? All those thousands of things that go around our brain all day long automatically calms the nervous system, reduces some of the cortisol in the body, and then through a series of invitations that the guide brings up is what really does the healing. And a really strong guide would be able to use whatever is happening in the forest at that moment. So it's not like you come there with a pre-plan, right? You can, but a really good guide is in tune with what's going on in the forest at that moment and leverages the forest as a therapist to help that group of people or person in the moment for that walk.
If I called you and I said, Cheree, I would like for you to lead me through a forest bathing or a forest therapy session, how would that unfold? What would happen?
And it's interesting that you ask that because we can do it virtual as well. We open up with introducing you to the land. So if we are in the same place, that's, not necessarily the exact same location, but in the same geographical location, then I would tell you the same as where I am. However, if you're in, say, in a different state or a different county, I would do the research on the land there, where the nearest watersheds are, what people originally seeded that land. I would research what type of dangers or hazards there could be, like poison ivy or what kind of snakes are in that area, whether it's prone to certain types of spiders or other things that you need to be careful of while you're there. Where the nearest restrooms are, because that's real, right? We're all human, we have those things. And that's how we would start. Just the introduction, getting you settled into the land, where you are, again, what the watersheds, where the water pours into the nearest ocean from where you are. So you can connect on a larger scale, right? A macro connection. And then the very first session, you would be outside or with a plant or on your porch looking outside. There's many different variations we can do depending on the person's accessibility. And then just settle them into their body. So it's almost like a mindfulness session way to bring them what's going on in the body, connection with the breath, connection with what they're hearing, connection with what they're feeling, connection with what they taste, connection with what they smell, connection with what they see. And doing that for about 15 minutes settles the person even more into the present moment. And now they're more willing to connect. They're more open to seeing things they might not have seen when they're worried about their phone or what they're going to do the next moment. And that's when they're really ready. And then we always start with what's in motion, because it's the most easiest transition to go from when you first start. And we actually call that the connection period, the introduction and the present moment. And then the what's in motion is all the connection with nature. And then afterwards, with the individual walks, that's what we call it the liminality. So that's where you have different invitations, like what type of leaves are you seeing? Or I wonder what would happen if you smelled different plants along your walk. And then there's a sharing. And the sharing is very open, where a person could actually share a sentence or two. They could give a poem. They could sing a song. They could do a dance. They could say nothing at all. So that way the person is in their own present experience in the forest, experiencing whatever it is that they're experiencing, and there's no limitations. And that in itself is very freeing. I've gotten so many different types of responses from that. Some people are very playful. They're like, oh, I haven't done this since I was a child. Some people don't do anything that I've asked them to do. And it's okay, because they're connecting with the forest in their way. And they're coming away with an experience that's unique just for them, right? Because everybody comes there with a different experience, right? They're a different human being. We're multifaceted human beings, and we bring that with us everywhere we go. And so through that invitation of the liminality and the sharing, and then bringing it to a close with connection. And for us, we had the tea, right? Sharing that with the forest, closing with the poem. It allows people then to make that connection back into what we call the tamed world. And it's through that whole series that makes the difference between walking outside by yourself and having a guide for forest therapy.
You extensively trained in an array of different modalities and educational pursuits. I know that you graduated from the Positive Psychology Master's Program at UPenn. You took the John Kabat-Zinn's certification for Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction. Where does this fit in with those kinds of experiences? Is it an additive to those? Can we practice other methods, other modalities, other ways of creating self-care as we are doing a forest therapy session?
Interesting that you would ask that. I don't. I stay very clean with what I've been taught for the forest therapy, because I believe it allows people to have more accessibility. And let me explain. So with the positive psychology, some people are turned off by the idea of, oh, it's only okay to be happy all the time. And that's can be very offensive to people. And some people are like, oh, well, that science doesn't include me. It always has certain types of people. There's lots of judgment that goes into the science of positive psychology. And I think that sometimes limits people. And then there's thoughts about meditation. I can't tell you how many people like, you just bring up the word and they're like, oh, I can't do that. My mind is like a squirrel. And everybody's mind's like a squirrel. That's what brains do. Mm-hmm. And I tell them that's why it's a practice. But that turns off people as well. So I stick with the forest therapy guidelines very specifically. I never use the word meditation. I don't even use the word mindfulness. I think I did use it, in describing something with you just now, but I typically try to stay away from that because people hesitate. They get tight, they get scared. There's a different expectation. And I just say we're going to be quiet. It's a quiet practice. We're going to notice our bodies. We're going to notice our breath. Notice the 5 senses in the body, which really is mindfulness, right? If anything, those practices helped me be a better guide and learn faster, I believe, than the average person who would take that program. But no, just by keeping people with the forest, keeping them in their bodies, and then sharing is all that's really needed. from to get the most benefit from the forest therapy?
One of the things that I noticed as you led me through the process, I've been a meditator for decades, both mindfulness as well as other forms of meditation, of which, as you know, there are many. What I found for me in that experience, after we really got into the process, as we settled and you offered the various invitations and I participated accordingly, I found myself entering a state of flow as opposed to a state of mindful meditation. For me, there's a distinct difference. And that was my experience. Now, everyone will have their own, but that was for me quite a revelation. And of course, with flow, you don't know you were in flow until until afterward. Where with mindfulness meditation, you know what's going on. You are paying attention to what is happening within your own thoughts, within your sensory experiences, and so forth. Flow is a little bit different state because you really don't know you're there until you look back and say, oh, yes, that was a state of flow. Having experienced the forest therapy work that you're doing, I can certainly recommend that anyone who would be interested in experiencing that or learning more should be in contact with you. And speaking of that, how can they do that?
Well, they can go right on to ChereeIngram.com, and there's a way to actually contact me and or set up 15 minutes just to ask me questions about anything that I offer. Because I'm also a positive psychology life coach. I do offer meditation as well as yoga. So that way they can reach out and see what's best for them, and then we work together to see what they might want to do together.
I found your website to be one of the brightest, most interesting sites, lovely sites, and informative sites that I have seen. And one of the,
Thank you.
well, you're welcome, and well deserved, of course. But one of the interesting, prominent items that you have is an image which you have labeled Happy, Healthy, Hearty Habits, H4 approach. What is the H4 approach, and how would forest therapy fit into that larger context?
Oh, thank you for asking that. You're right up my alley here, Steve. My belief is the cleaner you can be, the happier you will be, the healthier you will be, the more energy can flow. So we talked about this when you and I were together, where, the resistance and being an energist, we know that anything that we resist creates blockages, right, in the body. It creates all those unhealthy chemicals, or too much of the healthy chemicals are still not good for you either. And I think of myself as like a light bulb, as being an energist. And the cleaner I can be, then I have more access to source energy. So emotions, being angry or sad or frustrated or stressed, none of that is bad, right? All emotions are just communication from the body. But if you don't take any action towards those communications, it's like a blockage. It's what creates the stuff that makes you unhealthy. Forest therapy is just one more practice that helps clear up some of those blockages. What happens during the walks can be quite amazing. I've seen people bring back to their childhood and have some tears where they, some things that they've kind of pushed away and now they remember. Some people just having real quiet has brought up other things that they didn't really want to think about. And that's one of the worst things you can do with emotions. As you know, you introduced me to the Sedona method, and one of the things it talks about is just feeling the emotion. You don't push it away, just actually feeling it somehow magically makes that now healed because you've honored what that feeling wanted to feel. And so with forest therapy, there's all different kind of things that happen to people, and it gives them a cleaner source. And for me, that's part of being healthy and happy and having habits. So maybe your practice, there's another word for what I call habits, is being out in nature and going on forest therapy walks. Or maybe it's doing yoga, or maybe it's meditating, or maybe it's doing a combination of all those things, but you're dedicated to making sure that you are as clean as possible. And clean is what clean is for you. You know what's best. If you're eating a whole lot of food that's not necessarily honoring your body because it has a lot of chemicals in it and it's processed, that's not going to help you be your best self, right? If you're around people who don't necessarily push you up but pull you down, then you know that's not necessarily best. So it's not about judgment, it's more about doing those things on a regular basis that allow you to flourish and thrive.
Cheree, I couldn't agree more. And earlier today, saw a commentary or some commentary where someone suggested that physical illness in many cases is or are manifestations of unaddressed emotions. And there may be some truth to that. I am certainly no doctor and I diagnose no one, but clearly the role of stress in our health, the role of stress in our health is so important on so many levels. Spiritually, physically, emotionally, all of the above, and mentally, of course. And I do make a distinction between mental well-being and emotion well-being. They are certainly joined at the hip, but they can be two distinct situations or two distinct processes in our energy system. Cheree, I really thank you. Is there anything, well, first of all, can you share that website again where people can contact you?
Yes, it's ChereeIngram.com.
And how do you spell that?
It's Cheree with a C, Cheree, Ingram, INGRAM.com.
ChereeIngram.com, and I will have that information linked, of course, in the show notes. Cheree, as we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share about the forest bathing, or rather the forest therapy work that you're doing, or any other last-minute thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yes, there is, Steve. Thank you for asking. So the other thing that we had talked about, and I want to make sure that I shared again, was that how I found the training helped me be a better human being. And I never expected that. I signed up to be, a forest therapy guide so I can help others. And I had no idea that I would get so much out of it. In fact, I feel a little bit emotional now because I'm just so thankful and so full of gratitude in that some simple terminology, and I'd like to share it. One is called edges, knowing what your edges are and knowing that it's normal to have some things that are going to make you feel edgy. So when you think of edges, it could be, for me, when I was thinking about the forest, I was like, well, there's no way. If there's spiders, there's no way I can walk people through there. There's a lot of spiders, right? I actually like snakes, but not spiders. And the program walks you through, like, what are you going to do about that? How would you like to do that? And who could you work with to work with that edge? And so it's treated like you're just a normal person and this happens to be your edge. But then they expand it. Like, what happens if you walk with someone who's playing the radio or talking on their phone really loud and you feel like they're disrupting the group? And so it's irritating you, but they don't use the word irritating. They're like, it's pushing against your edge. And how would you treat that? What would you do? And as a result, I've been able to expand that to the rest of my life. Like, oh, there's something going on there. I think that's an edge. What am I going to do? Who am I going to work with? What am I going to do about that? Right? Kind of like what I just talked about before about, emotions are just communication. What are you going to do? But I never realized, I could take some better actions in a way that's very friendly and lighthearted to what I used to call frustrations. Now I don't. I'm like, oh, there's an edge. What do I like to do about that? And I think of it as a game. And as a result, I'm actually happier, if that's even possible for me, because you know how happy I already am, Steve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and then recognizing the other word, liminality, as a meditation teacher, and walking people through, being quiet and quieting the mind and staying focused. There's a lot of frustration when people come out and they start thinking about other things. Where, as a mindfulness teacher, you're like, no, that's great. You now recognize that you're thinking of other things. You are actually being mindful, but it's still kind of frustrating, right? But instead of that, with liminality, the forest therapy teaches that, oh, you come in and you come out. It's like a wave, a flow. And that's actually recognized as being a normal human behavior. And so I've adopted that same feeling with my meditation, and I feel like I've been able to get deeper. Because when I come out, it's like, oh, I'm flowing out and now I'm going back in. I don't feel like it's start, stop, start, stop. It's like a flow. So that's been very helpful. And then the last term that I'd like to just bring up is the stories. Because when you bring people out for the walk, you'd be surprised the different range of what people experience. It can range from, I like being outside in nature and seeing the trees, to someone else having a connection with the tree, hearing that tree tell them a story, or the tree speaks to them. Not everyone's accessible to hearing, oh, a tree talk to someone. But if you label everything a story, it makes it so much more open and more inclusionary to accept, oh, I'm going to listen openly because this is their story. So all of those three things just really helped me feel better about being a human when I feel like I'm not always at my best. And it's also allowed me to be more open towards others. So I've gotten just tremendous growth from the program. I can't say enough good things about it.
Clearly, it's a powerful practice, which I can testify from my own personal experience. As I thanked you then, I thank you again for the gift of leading me through that. And I would encourage anyone who would like to learn more about the forest therapy work and other things that you're doing, of which there are many, do visit Cheree's website at ChereeIngram.com. And Cheree, as always, it's a delight to talk with you. I thank you so much. And to the listeners, thank you for joining us. And Cheree and all of our listeners, I say namaste.
Namaste.